and 2-year-olds all the way to 80-year-olds. And so I've taught literacy in different types of settings. And this is some of the things that I do that really help me. These are some of the things that you can do, and you don't even have to have technology, which I think is fantastic sometimes. So some of the things you can do is change your pitch. You can vary your speech. So that means talking very, very fast. So for right now, I'm saying things such as talking really, really fast, or something such as talking very slow, or even pausing for a dramatic effect, or talking in a voice like this, like Mickey Mouse, or talking in a very low voice. So there's a lot of things you can do with your voice to really keep students' attention. And some of the things that I noticed is their eyes get all big when they end up seeing that you make like a monster voice or something. So you can animate your face. So like a monster voice, it'd be like or something like that. And I think it's really important that we get over being embarrassed, that we're able to have fun and tell the stories and just make it fun for the kids. Make funny sounds, like if there's onomatopoeia, which is like bees buzzing and things like that, then to be able to go buzz or arf, arf, or something to make the sounds that are actually would be kind of like sound effects with the story. And then, of course, let them choose their favorite books that they already read. A lot of times parents will read books to their kids, and if you take them in the classroom, then that's really fantastic because you're doing things that they know and things they're really excited about. I like to get each of my kids together, and in each of them, me their favorite book, and throughout the class period, the year, we will read all of those books. So one of the great things to do, I think, is to dress up. I often dress up as a witch, or sometimes I'll dress up when we read the witch stories, or I'll dress up as an animal, or I dress up as one of the main characters. And I try to dress up as, importantly, the narrator telling the story. And I think that's really important because if you have really young learners, then if you dress up and you dress up as the narrator, the one telling the story, then you can teach them something about that, like what point of view the story is coming from. And you can even start off that way. You can say, which character am I in the story? And they can say, you can get them to tell you that it's the story that that it's the person telling the story. That, for example, you may be familiar with Julia Donaldson's The Gruffalo, which I think is a fantastic story. And pretty much anything from Julia Donaldson is a sure winner for kids. And if you read The Gruffalo, then it's not told from the Gruffalo. It's actually told from the little mouse. So you can dress up as a mouse, and then that way the kids aren't, confused of who's reading the story. But here's some other types of things too. If you're good with a guitar, bring a guitar in, or a piano, or if you're good at any type of instrument, I really think it's great to have a sing-along. Julia Donaldson's books are really great with sing-alongs. There's many stories out there where the authors have free websites and they have their videos on YouTube, so that way you can sing along. So if you don't have anything else, you can definitely get the YouTube video of it. Sometimes if it's a main kind of animal or something in the story, then I'll go ahead and I'll just sing a song that maybe wouldn't necessarily be part of it, but is very good. For example, we might, if we're reading a story about spiders, then we might sing the Incy Wincy Spider. So I think sing-alongs are really great, and they get the kids really excited. And if it has hand gestures, even better. Sometimes you can sing the entire song as well. Another thing that I really like is to make the kids characters. Have them become characters. They can each make finger puppets of the characters. And a lot of times if you look on the websites, if you just go ahead and you do a search for the actual story, then you'll find a lot of teachers made finger puppets of the characters in many of the famous stories. So if you just Google it. There's a lot of free resources you'll find, and then you don't have to worry about tracing or anything like that. You can have the printout. So I think that's really good. The other things that we can do is that you can make popsicle characters. So if you don't have a lot of time to make finger puppets, then you can make a lot of popsicle characters, which is basically like a little popsicle stick, and then it just has like a cutout of this colored. Now this is really great homework for the kids. As you can tell the parents, you can give them the coloring sheets and the little characters that they can cut out, and this can be a home project for young learners, and they really like to color. But this way, if you have a limited amount of time in the classroom, then you can go ahead and you can have them create these characters. You can have them create kind of finger puppets that are just like animals, or if you know the characters ahead of time, then you can have them create like a man, a woman, so that way they can continue to reuse them inside the stories. Now, one of the things you can do is also create regular puppets, and there's all sorts of puppets that you can create. And there's actually another webinar that we did on the various puppets that you can look for inside the bit.ly folder that I'll give you at the end. But assign roles and assign a line. So what I like to do is for example, each student will have a role. Like in the Gruffalo, there's the mouse, there's the Gruffalo, there's a snake, there's an owl. And so each of the kids, when it's their turn, they have the finger puppet. But not only do they have the finger puppet, but they get to say the line. So I don't say the line. I pause, the dramatic pause, and then they will come and they will read the line. And at home, I have the parents and them memorize the role. So that's one way you can get them involved. Invite guest speakers. Now, sometimes there's a syndrome that you might be familiar with called mommy deaf. And what it means is basically kids, after a time, since you're the teacher, you often are the disciplinarian. You have to tell them, you know, sit down, be quiet. So when you're reading a story, sometimes what happens is that a lot of times in the stories, the teachers, they just get tired of hearing the teacher's voice, so they may not listen to you. Invite guest speakers to tell the stories. For example, here's the fire chief telling a story about a fire and about firemen. And I think that's just a wonderful idea. There are lots of different organizations, policemen, inside your area, your local area, that will be willing to read a story to the kids. And the kids will love to meet a real policeman or a real firefighter, and they would love to, what I'm going to show in the next one, well, they will also love to dress up. So notice how the kids here are dressed up as firemen. I think that's so cute, see? So have the kids dress up, get into the story as well. Kids love to dress up. Another thing that I like to use is a felt board. Felt boards are fantastic. You can have the characters. You can actually have not only the scene and talk about the props of the kids. The kids can make them themselves, but they can also do sequencing activities on the felt board. So you can have a really large one like this teacher does. I have a small one that I have made. And actually on the bit.ly address, well, the full folder of all the links will be website that tells you how to make your own very cheap, like $5 or less felt board with felt characters. So I'm very cheap, and so I make my own. But you can also buy them online. They're a little bit expensive, and you can also, if you have a budget, you can buy famous characters to go with them, and kind of general, different types of general types of characters. Yeah, frugal, not cheap. Okay. Yeah, that's better. I'm frugal. And so a lot of times we'll have the kids do sequencing activities, or I'll put the characters up and I'll say, okay, who do you think are the characters in the story? And we'll put a whole bunch of animals, and then they can guess, and we can do pre-reading exercises, and then we can do after reading exercises. And each kid goes up, and it's very easy for them to understand and very easy for them to play games and things like that with it. Like, for example, which one of the characters wasn't in the story. And then you have, for example, the shark, the turtle, and then this. urchin, the sea urchin, and then the child gets to choose which one isn't. So these are fun games that you can do. Um, hmm. Okay, there's my slide with the kids dressing up. So sometimes that happens. Okay, another great thing to do is change the environment. I think this is really important. So I have an area, story time area, that's on the ground. It's a carpet, and then the kids have pillows. They each get to bring their pillow, and then they sit on the floor. And this area is very colorful and things like that. But every once in a while, I also like to take the kids outside. But not only take them outside, we'll read the story as a class together. But sometimes, if it's an enclosed space, if you have an enclosed space, and in Germany when I was teaching, you did have enclosed spaces. So it wasn't very dangerous or anything like that. But if you have a small area and you work with older kids too, you can tell them, choose one of the books, choose a book, come in, we're going to take 15 minutes, if you have 15 minutes or 10 minutes, and we're going to read, go off and read by yourself, any book you want. Then we come back in a circle and we talk about the books we read and what we liked about it and things like that. I think it's really important to change the environment and the way they read, because what happens is that we begin to develop habits for them. We get to show them that reading doesn't have to be so intense and studious within the classroom, but we get them to see that it can be a form of quiet, a form of entertainment, a form of relaxation and escapism. And so one of the things that I love to do is go to the picnic, to an area, and I personally, I will lay a blanket down and I will lay there and I'll read for a few minutes, and sometimes I'll even take a nap. But I want my kids to be able to do the same thing. I want them to have where they just decide, that they want to go, and they want to go on the couch, or they want to go outside, and they want to just enjoy the day reading. And I think that's really wonderful if we teach our kids that. So we can do that. We can change the environment by having each of the kids bring props. So we don't necessarily have to go outside. We can do this inside. If you have stations, I have a lot of learning stations, then I'll let the students have about 15 minutes, especially if we did something really active like a game and they're very tired, or I can tell that they just need a break, then I'll say, okay, we're taking 15 minutes, choose any book you want. It can even be a comic book. Go off to any corner, and we're going to have a quiet time, and we're going to read. And the kids really enjoy it. Bring in props. So if you have within the story different types of props that come about, and there's a lot of really great stories out there with music, and they'll talk about the band, and the kids can each bring like an instrument, or you can bring an instrument, or the kids can make the instruments, and then they can play them during the times of the story. So whenever their instrument comes up, then they can play the drum or this. So whatever the props are in the story, have the kids bring them in and then have them use it, or have them say a line with it. So for example, if they have like a certain character, like a teddy bear or something like that, then the kids can, when that character comes about, then they can say the line. And I try to get like different types of stories that have different characters and things like that when I have the kids do this, so that every single kid can have a prop. A really good one, for example, is The Hungry Caterpillar. And Eric Carle books are fantastic. And so each kid for each day of the week could bring like the apple or the strawberry, and so that they would show it up. So that's a lot of things. Really important, I think, is to involve parents. I don't think we involve parents enough with reading. And it's so important. Statistics show that with literacy, that parents actually reading to their kids increases literacy by 90%. So kids will have a higher level of reading that are read to than the kids that never have their parents read to them. So it's really, really important for literacy to do that. How can you involve parents? Well, these are the ways that I have my parents involved. I have them suggest books that they have already read, and I've done this in Germany. So when I have done this in Germany, German is their first language. So what I'll try to do is I'll find the equivalent of the book in English. Encourage them to read to their children. A lot of times I'll list the books. I'll list where they can buy the books if they want to buy the books. Um, I will encourage them to where they can get the books online, and sometimes I'll just let them check them out from the library. I'll have a library of books, and then the parent, if they want to read it to the children, then they can check it out and then give it to me later. I make it optional so that way the parents can read this to their children when they want. It's not mandatory. Actually, none of my homework is ever mandatory. But because I suggested, a lot of times the parents will do the homework. I'm actually really surprised a lot of them do it. Provide them with games to play, games that they can play around the house with the kids to get them excited about the reading. I think, make the build up. I really like to make the build up of the reading. So I give them like little online games they can play, but also games around the house. Like I Spy is always great. And if your particular book is dealing with nouns, then just make it to where it's I Spy Nouns, or your book deals with colors, whatever the theme is, then that's what they could play with. Provide them with tips to make the readings more engaging and enjoyable. So at the beginning we talked about doing the voice pitch, we talked about dressing up, we talked about slowing down, being really loud and animated with the face, and using hand gestures, and being really quiet. So a lot of times parents might not understand that really engages their children. And so I think we can provide them with little tips or a little YouTube video that shows them the difference. And it could be us reading a story and reading it like very dull, and then with, the way a story should be read to a child. Engage with the wiki. Now this is from my Storytime Wiki, and you'll see it says welcome to the English Storytime. This was one we did on superheroes. So what I do is I list the book that we read. I tell them the book right here, and usually I'll provide like a YouTube link or a website link or a link to anything that has a lot of information about the book. I give them, this is what it looks like for the parents. It says, listen to the superhero song we sang in class. So there's after ones and then there's pre. So sometimes I'll do the pre ones as well. So what happens is, this is what happened. So I'll put it in past tense, or the future tense. And then afterwards I go back and I change it after we do it, so that way they can do it as homework as well. So here's one. Read a story about superheroes online, design your own superhero, play a pretend game with your child, where you and your child each pick a toy to pretend are superheroes. Name what powers you have by repeating the phrase we learned in class. I'm a superhero, I can. See how many verbs your child can come up with, and pretend you are saving another toy. Okay, so I try to give them online games, and then I also try to give them a suggestion of games they can play without the online. So another thing is that I think these are all optional. These are just giving them several choices of what they can do. They don't have to do any of these. They can pick one, and I encourage them to choose one. And you can see a lot of the different themes and ideas on the EnglishStorytime.pbworks.com. This is my wiki for the parents. Okay, so there's an argument that goes around, and it's called whether or not kids should read aloud and the benefits of reading aloud. And I am here to argue that yes, kids should read aloud. I think it's really important for several reasons. One of the reasons is, first of all, they can tell the pronunciation. I know that when I hear myself speak, that often I will be able to hear the way something sounds, and I'll realize that I'm reading the word wrong or incorrectly. I'm not pronouncing it right. And especially if you have students just developing a lot of ways that they listen and they are able to imitate language, if they have to hear the language. But here are my suggestions for a read aloud. One of them is have them read. I think it's not only important that they read aloud, and when we think of read aloud, sometimes we think to the class, like sitting in a desk, or perhaps by themselves, but that's not what I mean. Actually, what I like to do is I like to pair them with they're in pairs and they get to read to each other inside the classroom. And they really like to do that. And I think it's really important because if they're reading by themselves, then they're not going to put the animation and stuff. But what I have observed is that because I'm very animated and I tell the kids, like the kids see how animated I am with reading the story, then they will read to their partner or another student just like that. And they'll make silly voices and things like that. So that's one of the ways that I like to get the students to read aloud to each other, to read in pairs. Sometimes I'll have them bring a toy, especially if it's really, really young learners. They can bring their favorite toy, their doll, their bear, their stuffed animal, and then they can read to their bear or stuffed animal. And the really little kids love this. Now, you're not going to get a teenager to do this, but you will be able to get, the really tiny kids to do this. Read to a sibling, a parent, a partner, and they can do this at home as well. And what I mean to sibling, a lot of the teenagers that I have taught, I'll have them actually create a story for young learners or kids, maybe another younger class, and they will read the story to the younger class, to the younger kids, and they'll do the same thing. They'll break off in pairs. They'll have their own their own child that I have matched them up with, and they get to read their story that they created to one of the little kids. And they really like that. They really enjoy writing stories for the younger class and sharing it with them. For homework, a lot of times I'll ask them to, I'll suggest that they read to sibling, parent, partner, or a toy. And yes, uh, I do like to incorporate technology. There's really amazing things out there. Animoto, Storybird, any kind of story website. So a lot of times, if you go to the actual author's website, you'll find so many different kinds of colorings and games and songs and so many resources that you can incorporate with the book if you have the book. So I would recommend doing that. There's a site that says it's a 3D pop-up book site, and that will be in the address that I'll put at the end. But it's really awesome. They have Little Red Riding Hood, and the characters just pop up in 3D, and you see the whole scene. So I think it's really, really cool. VoiceThread, a lot of times we'll retell a story. My German students created their own animal stories with Özge in Turkey, and also some students in New Zealand. So VoiceThread is really good. These are all free sites. We've used Blabberize. Blabberize is really cool. You get to upload pictures and then make the mouse move. So it's really fun. And if you do have the technology, even if it's like one iPad, and that is something that I have, there are so many amazing books that are on the iPad and the kids love. And one of the reasons why I would suggest this, if you do have an iPad, I only take one into the classroom. But one of the things that they have is they really incorporate some of the real world things with the kids. So for example, if you've ever seen Animation Alice or Animated Alice, that's a fantastic story. And the kids can touch the clock, and they'll have each kid in a different scene. They can move different things and they can hear the sounds. But one of the most exciting things that I've ever seen on the iPad is that the kids are asked to draw in one part of the story. They're asked to make a drawing. They say, oh, can you draw this? And then you just take a picture of the coloring or the drawing that the kids did. And then later on in the story, when you look at the wall, you see the kids drawing. So I think it's really, really, really just kind of exciting, the things that you can do with the different types of books that are inside on the iPad. So if you have the option, then I definitely recommend it. But you don't have to do that. You can use websites that have technology such as sound effects and things like that. If you don't want to make the sound effects yourself, there's just so much that you can do. Thank you, Mariana, for sharing that. So I hope you came away with a lot of really good ideas, and you can always go to this bit.ly address and you'll find so many more websites and ideas, and actually a lot of the books that I recommend for doing that I recommend that are great for kids, like a lot of authors that are out there. And if you have any kind of suggestions, then I am going to allow you to have the microphone, and all you have to do is raise your hand or just type in the box, and then you go to the very top and you click on the green microphone, and then you can tell us about the wonderful ways that you oops, okay, no, sorry about that. The wonderful ways that you have your students that you really encourage reading for them. This came off. So if anybody has any kind of input or questions, you're more than welcome to type it inside the chat box, or you're more than welcome to share it with us. Okay, well then I am going to end the meeting. You can always email me as well at Shelly Terrell, and you can get a certificate of attendance. And it might take a few weeks, but thank you. Oh, well, thank you for coming. Thanks so much for coming.